Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 215 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I'm doing real well.
Good.
Hanging in there.
Awesome.
Getting ready for Crime Con.
Yeah.
I think at the time that this comes out, you and I will be flying back home.
We'll be leaving on a jet plane, or however that song goes.
It goes exactly that way.
Yeah.
Leaving on a jet plane.
Right.
So we're looking forward to that, and we'll give an update after we get back. We've got some supporter shout outs to give. So for Patreon, we had Jasmine Herrera.
Hey, Jasmine.
Jennifer Millsap.
Hey, appreciate that, Jennifer.
Roxy Smith.
What's going on, Roxy?
Victoria.
Good old Victoria.
Susan Mason.
Hey, Susan.
Fee Patterson.
What's up, Fee?
Patty Finning.
Well, thank you, Finning.
Paige Morales.
What's going on, Morales?
Candace Ingram.
Hey, Candace.
Lori Mentor.
Appreciate that, mental.
Daniel Zuchik.
Zuchik.
That's what I'm going with.
Yeah.
Lauren.
Hey, Lauren.
Lynette Russo.
I appreciate that, Lynette.
Tess.
Good old Tess.
Becky H.
I like that. Hey, Becky.
Buddy and the Bear.
Well, what's going on, Buddy and the Bear?
Sounds like a 1970s television show.
Sounds like BJ and the Bear.
Well, kind of like that. Yeah. Jody Kemp.
Hey, Jody.
Molly McCann.
What's going on, Molly?
John Howard.
Hey, appreciate that, John.
Pam Hogbin.
What's up, Hogbin?
To Luigi.
Tologi.
Hillary.
Hey, Hillary.
Terry Roloff.
Appreciate that, Roloff.
Jazz Manley.
Jazz. Like jazz fingers.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands, yeah.
But Manley.
Yes.
And Jackie Green.
What's going on, Jackie?
So we appreciate all the new support. And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Ellie Rawson.
Oh, appreciate that, Ellie.
So thanks for everyone who supports us on Patreon. We had some great PayPal donations from Judy Larson.
Thank you, Judy.
JJ Coatser.
What's going on, JJ?
Rachel Weinbarger.
Hey, thanks, Rachel.
Kathy Holden.
What's going on, Kathy?
And Jill Sutter.
What's going on, Sutter?
So thanks to all of you.
Yes.
Gibbs, right now on True Crime All the Time, we have an episode out. It's on the 1995 murder of 15-year-old Elise Pollard. And, you know, this is one of those cases where Elise was killed by some kids her age.
Sure was.
But it's the reason behind the murder.
Wow. Stupid.
That really grabbed
Yeah.
everyone's attention. There's Satanism. There are death metal band lyrics involved. So it's an interesting episode. Make sure you check that out.
Very good episode.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am.
We're talking about the 1972 unsolved kidnapping of Virginia Piper. So we're headed to Minnesota. In 1972, Virginia Piper, spouse to Harry Piper Jr., a wealthy financier, was the victim of a kidnapping for ransom. Her abductors held her in a public state park for 2 days, collecting a ransom of $1 million in small bills, and releasing Virginia, physically unharmed. Unfortunately, the kidnappers were never found, and little of the money has turned up over the years. The FBI would call the case at the time the most successful kidnapping of all time. But over the years, the questions have remained. Who kidnapped Virginia, and what happened to the money?
Because that was a lot of money.
A lot of money now, definitely a lot of money in 1972. On Thursday, July 27th, 1972, Virginia Piper, known as Ginny to her friends, returned home after having her hair done at the local beauty salon. Her two regular maids were at work in the home. For a wealthy socialite, Ginny had a lot of responsibilities. They mostly centered around her philanthropic and civic endeavors. She was a staunch believer in making a difference in the causes she endorsed. She was set to attend a hospital board meeting at 3 p.m. that day. So she found herself with a few hours to spare before that meeting, so she went out to the back garden to unwind and tend to her flowers. Ginny escaped to the back garden whenever she could to spend some time with her flowers because the garden was her private oasis.
I think a lot of people like doing that. They like to go out in nature and, smell the flowers and touch the plants and things like that. Just earthing. It's good. It's good for you.
Well, I think it can be very relaxing to some. Planting flowers. You're doing work. You're getting your hands in the dirt. There's a lot of good things, I think, that can come from it.
Sure, yeah.
While outside, Ginny heard a commotion in the house and entered through the back door to see what was happening. She was met by two armed intruders, and her maids had been tied up in another room. One man asked her where her, quote, old man was, to which Ginny responded that he was at work, as he always was on a Thursday. He then wanted to know if they had a safe in the home, and Ginny truthfully responded that they didn't. The other man put a pillowcase over her head and handcuffs on her wrists and said, "You're coming with us." Before leaving, the men left an envelope labeled family on a table by the door. Later, when it was opened, it was a carefully typed ransom demand.
Probably seems strange that, somebody with this type of wealth didn't have a safe in their mansion back then, but
maybe they had so much money, they had it in safe deposit boxes. Who knows?
That's true, yeah.
This, to me, Gibbs, it almost seems as though it's a plot taken right out of some Liam Neeson movie.
Yeah.
Like Liam Neeson is the husband.
Right.
The wife's been taken and he's going to get her back. Obviously a very scary situation. Anytime someone breaks into your house, but especially if they're tying up your maids, they're handcuffing you, you're being blindfolded or something's being placed over your head and you're being taken away.
Scary. Plus, they just messed up her new hairdo.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, she'd just come from the beauty salon. She couldn't have been happy about that. Now, I'm sure that probably was not the first thing on her mind.
No, but, I'm thinking afterwards.
Ginny was bundled into the back seat of a car and driven several hours north to Jay Cook State Park near Duluth, and she was chained to a tree. She would be bound there for 2 days and nights with little food. It rained, soaking her to the bone, and the whole time she was in the presence of a hostile man armed with a gun. One man stayed to guard her while the other left in a green Chevy Impala.
Now, that's scary, to think that you're chained up like that and they're not doing anything to protect you from the elements. They just want to make sure you can't get away.
Yeah, to me, that's scary because I don't know if at that point Ginny knew this was a ransom situation. You would think in a ransom situation, they would want to treat her well. They would want to keep her well.
Sure.
They don't want her getting sick and dying or, obviously that would mess up the whole ransom situation. Once her mask fell off, The guard ordered her not to look at him, but Ginny managed to get a peek at his face. Now, he was wearing a pantyhose mask over his face, but the hose had a large run, which allowed her to see his features fairly clearly, especially his eyes. She noted that one eye had a white stripe running vertically through his pupil. That's something that I don't know that I've ever seen.
It's definitely an oddity.
Yeah, it's got to be something that a very low percentage of people have, I would think.
Yeah, and it comes up through the investigation.
I would think it'd be a really good clue.
Yeah.
As to the identity of this person. Virginia Piper and her husband, investment banker and businessman Harry Piper, who was known by his childhood nickname of Bobby, were both intelligent, socially conscious, and well-loved in their Orono, Minnesota neighborhood, just outside of Minneapolis. They had 3 sons, whose ages ranged from 18 to 27 at the time. Their oldest son, Harry, was an attorney with the U.S. Justice Department, while their middle son, Addison, was a Piper employee who eventually succeeded his father in running the company. The youngest, David, was just starting college.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, pretty impressive. I'm assuming that these kids all had the best educations that money could buy.
Well, I would hope so, yeah.
They had, obviously, all the advantages of wealth and social status and all of that. But it does sound like they were making good of it because, if you think about it, Gibbs, there are a lot of people that are born into wealth and social status who don't make anything out of themselves. I mean, you can look at pop stars of the 80s kids and just see that
trust fund babies.
They don't have the drive to really make something of themselves. They're more than happy just to live off of mom and dad's money.
Yeah.
I don't respect those people quite as much as I do of the people who have money, but still go out and want to make a name for themselves.
Have that drive.
Yeah, I really respect that. Now, let's be honest, it's easier for them. There's no doubt about it, but you still have to do it.
Well, sure.
And you still have to make the decision that you're going to put the work in. So, yeah, let's give them their due.
I mean, you got to be intelligent to get through some of these certain qualifications and jobs that some of these people do.
On that Thursday in July, when Ginny was abducted at gunpoint from her home, no one knew what her fate would be, not even Ginny herself. It was later believed that the gunman probably intended to abduct Bobby, who they mistakenly thought had come home early that day. Ginny would later say that it was fortunate that she had been the one taken instead of Bobby because she could talk to anyone. So I think by that, Gibb, she's saying that her social skills were better than Bobby's.
Sure. So she probably had the personality to adapt to that situation better than he did.
Yeah, and maybe Bobby, being this titan of industry, would have been more forceful, tried to fight them. Maybe that's what she was thinking. The 2 maids managed to free themselves and called Bobby at his investment firm, and they frantically relayed the details of Ginny's kidnapping. Bobby Piper immediately contacted the FBI and the local sheriff. The ransom letter on the table demanded $1 million in unmarked $20 bills to be delivered according to, quote, precise and non-negotiable instructions that would be communicated the following night. And Gibbs, I think Bobby sensed right away that these kidnappers were extremely serious, and he was not about to risk his wife's life because the FBI wanted to arrest these people.
No, his wife's life was more important than any arrest.
So he and a few friends set about collecting the $1 million ransom. What do you think that would be today? $1 million in 1972 is what?
Probably $7 million today.
Okay. Actually, I think that's probably one of the closer estimates that you've had lately.
That's a lot of jack.
It is a lot. And to think that you and a couple of friends are just going to go around and gather up $1 million, I think it tells you what kind of money this guy had.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he was that liquid that, okay, I can get the $1 million.
Just give me a couple hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was made up of 50,000 $20 bills, which he put in a duffel bag. Must have been a pretty big duffel bag.
Yeah.
I think about 50,000 bills.
It's a lot, man.
I wouldn't even think one duffel bag could hold that much.
Yeah, I'm not sure what size duffel bag was.
Yeah. Now, I have carried a lot of money in a duffel bag before, you know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for different jobs that I worked at. And thinking back, I remember thinking it's not as big as what I thought it would be.
It never is it?
No.
Yeah.
Now, $1 million is a lot of money, obviously, and if it was all in hundreds, it would be even smaller.
Yeah, I think the bag weighed just slightly more than 100 pounds.
The FBI searched for evidence at the house, and Gibbs, the kidnappers, left behind really nothing. No physical evidence, no fingerprints, footprints, handwriting, nothing. The two maids got a look at the car that they drove away in, but they really could offer no description other than the car was green. No make, no model, really anything like that. The next day, on Friday, Bobby answered the home phone to hear Ginny's recorded voice, instructing him on how to deliver the ransom to her abductors. That evening, he put the duffel bag containing the money into the trunk of the family car and followed the detailed instructions specified in a second phone call. These instructions took him to a tavern called the Sportsman's Retreat on the edge of downtown Minneapolis. Bobby entered the bathroom and placed the keys to the car on the ledge above the door. He then waited to use the payphone as instructed. While he was waiting, the kidnappers transferred the ransom from his car to theirs, and they disappeared. He returned home at midnight, not knowing the whereabouts or the fate of his wife.
So scary, man. You did what you were supposed to do, right? You got the money rounded up. You took it to the delivery spot. At one point, they took it out of your trunk, and you got to your car. No wife. You get home, no wife. I mean, do you start second guessing yourself?
Yeah, you probably do. I mean, I think even before you do it, you know you're taking a risk. You're going to hand over this money, and you're basically hoping that by doing so, these people are going to let your wife go and she's going to come home healthy.
Yeah.
And you've got her back again. But there's no guarantee of that. And the FBI was against Bobby making the ransom transfer himself. They created a plan to try to trap the kidnappers when the exchange took place. They even had an agent ready to take the wheel, but Bobby was adamant that he would not do anything to endanger Ginny. And so he went ahead with the delivery himself. What Bobby Piper didn't know was that the FBI had 36 undercover agents stationed along his route. It would turn out to be irrelevant because not a single agent spotted Bobby or the kidnappers. And the exchange went down without a single law enforcement officer being present.
Well, certainly not the FBI's finest day then.
No, I'm sure they weren't happy. They had put this plan together. Now, Bobby wouldn't follow the plan in its entirety, but part of it he didn't even need to know about. They were like, okay, we'll just have all these agents, and when it goes down, we'll make our move. But obviously they weren't at the right place.
Yeah, they weren't able to follow through on what they hoped to do.
The next morning, Saturday, a clergyman in Minneapolis received a phone call from the kidnappers telling him where to find Virginia Piper. The mail caller told him to pass those details on to the FBI, which he did. 3 hours later, the FBI arrived in Jay Cook State Park, and they found Ginny. still chained to a tree. She was scared, wet, and hungry, but otherwise unharmed.
3 hours later. Seems like a very long time to be waiting to be rescued from the time the first call comes out. Now, granted, I get it. This is in the 70s, so things aren't going to move rapidly, but it still seems like a long time. Couldn't they not get the phone call routed over to somebody near that place sooner and get out there? Or maybe it just took that amount of time to actually find her.
Yeah, it does seem like a long time. Obviously, I don't know how far this Jay Cook State Park is from, where they are, but I think, what you said makes some sense. It would have taken longer than it takes today, probably. Just the communication alone.
Sure. Yeah.
To get it routed to the right place and all of that. And of course, the FBI is probably not going to hand it off to someone that might have been closer, because they're going to want to be the ones on the scene first. In my thinking, for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they want the credit, probably.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
They don't want to give the credit to somebody else. And they probably don't want someone else, a ranger or, someone like that, messing with the crime scene, because maybe there's valuable clues there.
Good point.
It turned out that Ginny had not been assaulted physically or otherwise, but Gibbs, that's not to say that she escaped the encounter unscathed, because Ginny and Bobby would have to deal with the trauma related to her abduction for the rest of their lives. I mean, that's not something you're going to get over quickly.
No.
If at all.
It's not like you're going to wake up the next morning and go, "Ooh, man, I'm glad that's over. All right, I'm done."
No. I mean, if you're abducted, handcuffed at gunpoint, a bag's placed over your head, you're chained to a tree for days. No, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night reliving that over and over. There's going to be a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
PTSD, which I'm not even sure they knew much about in 1972, but there's going to be a lot of stuff to deal with.
I'm sure she has some nightmares.
The FBI embarked on one of the most extensive investigations in its history up to that point. They had hundreds of agents around the country analyzing more than 1,000 potential suspects. They spent tens of millions of dollars in the process. The case also received national recognition due to the prominence of the Pipers. The fact that the crime happened in broad daylight in the middle of the week, and the fact that the crime took place at a large and opulent mansion. I mean, you add all of those things together, Gibbs, those are the type of cases that fascinate the country.
Well, sure. Yeah. Just like the Lindbergh case was.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you have something like this that happens to a prominent family, it's going to be big time news. The federal statute of limitations for the crime of kidnapping was only 5 years in 1972. And so they have this massive investigation. They looked at over 1,000 individuals, and it was just 16 days before the 5-year clock was set to run out that the FBI arrested two men, Ken Callahan and Donald Larson. Both men had extensive criminal records dating back to high school. Both men had been incarcerated for most of their adult lives, and these were guys that were petty crooks. They pulled small jobs, small crimes. One attorney described them as, quote, stumble bums.
Stumble bums. There's a term you just don't hear today.
I don't know that I've ever heard that term. But, you look at these two guys and what they had done throughout their life. To me, they don't seem like the type of individuals that would try to pull off a crime of this magnitude.
I don't know if they were smart enough to pull it off.
Both Callahan and Larson denied any involvement. They said they had no knowledge whatsoever of the abduction besides what they had read in the newspaper. Both were tried in federal court in the fall of 1977. But I think going into the trial, Gibbs, it was pretty evident that most of the evidence was circumstantial. One item of physical evidence was a scrap of a grocery bag that held a partial thumbprint believed to belong to one of the kidnappers. But despite being examined by the FBI forensic lab 3 times, it wasn't until right before the trial that the lab issued the finding that the print belonged to Donald Larson.
Kind of suspicious in some people's mind.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've had it this whole time, you've worked on it for however long, and right before the trial starts, the determination is made that, yes, it does belong to one of the defendants. I think anybody looking at it from the outside in has to view it as a little bit suspicious. There was also a hair found in the getaway car that the FBI recovered. Examiners believe that it came from Ken Callahan, who had long hair at the time. But, really, Gibbs, when you look at this, there is not much in the way of physical evidence. We know what hair analysis was like back then, much different than it is today. Unfortunately, a lot of people were convicted based on the fact that this hair looked microscopically similar to this hair.
Right.
And then, years later, it turns out that it couldn't have been that person. So obviously it wasn't that person's hair.
Times have changed.
For the better in that respect.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to investigative techniques, only $4,000 of the $1 million ransom was ever identified. Called Piper's 20s, the kidnappers went into banks in southern Minnesota and they asked for smaller denominations of bills for $300 in 20s. So basically, they were laundering the money.
Here's $300 in 20s. Can you give me $300 back in 10s and 5s, please?
Yeah.
And 1s?
Yeah. Now, it takes a long time to launder $1 million, $300 at a time.
Yeah, it's going to take forever, man.
But on one hand, it's really smart, right? You walk in with $10,000 in 20s and ask for 10s and 5s. Okay. That's going to draw some attention. $300, maybe not so much.
Yeah. It's a way to stay off the radar. All banks have been notified to be on the lookout for the serial numbers of the $20 bills used in the ransom. They even printed up little notebooks with the serial numbers printed in them.
And one alert teller worked with a police sketch artist to create a composite drawing of the likeness of the 2 kidnappers. These drawings would be introduced as evidence at trial, despite the fact that they were so generic, Gibbs. This is the way that they were described, generic to the point that they were basically worthless.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
But they had some sketches.
Ginny Piper was unable to identify the voices of her kidnappers at trial, but she did mention the white stripe along the pupil of the one kidnapper when questioned by the defense, who had read about it in one of her statements to investigators. The defense used this to help their case. They called an ophthalmologist who educated the jury about arcus senilis that caused a white stripe along a person's pupil. He testified that the condition was permanent, and once it appeared, the white stripe would be visible on an individual's pupil forever. All their defense attorney had to do was to parade his clients before the jury to note their perfectly normal pupils. It would seem for them to get an easy acquittal.
Well, yeah, if they don't have that white line going through their eye, as she saw when that one time her mask came down, that surely these can't be the same people.
They can, but don't call me Shirley. But here's the thing, Gibbs, and we see this in a number of trials. Juries are fickle. They're humans. They're lay people. Most of us have served on a jury. Now, how many people have served on a jury for a murder trial? That's a different story, but we've seen it time and time again where there's a lot of scientific type information that is thrown at the jury. Not all of these people may understand it. And the prosecution oftentimes presents it in a way as though it's much more factual than what it really is. Going back to that concept of a hair being microscopically similar. Okay, well, what does that really mean? If you get an expert up on the stand back in 1972, well, to a jury, that might mean that there's no way this is not them. This guy's telling us that the hair is the same.
The Perry Mason moment?
Yeah. But in actuality, that's not what is being said. It's microscopically similar. It doesn't 100% mean that it's the same hair.
Right.
Despite the concrete evidence to the contrary, after 4 days of deliberation, both Callahan and Larson were found guilty of the kidnapping of Virginia Piper. But Callahan and Larson were successful on appeal, and they were granted a new trial. The new trial took place 2 years after the first one. And in this trial, they were exonerated for the kidnapping of Ginny Piper. The FBI insisted that the second jury got it wrong. And despite the missing ransom money, the Bureau declared the case closed. Many people familiar with the case believe the job was too sophisticated for the likes of Callahan and Larson and maintain that at least 3 individuals were involved. So there's a couple of things here for me to unpack. First of all is the idea that law enforcement is so convinced that they have the right individuals that they just close the case, even when those individuals are acquitted.
Yeah, I don't know how you can do that,
Yeah, we see it. It happens.
I definitely think they felt confident that they had the right suspects from day one.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. Now, what was that confidence based on? Was it based on irrefutable physical evidence? I don't think it was.
Yeah.
So, then when a jury takes a look at the evidence that you have, the second jury, and says, no, we don't find them guilty, then you're just going to say, well, we know it's them, so we're closing the case and we're not looking at anybody else. I find that very strange.
Yeah, I do too. Why be final with something?
Now, you could make the case that they would have an extremely hard time prosecuting anyone else because of what they have gone through with Callahan and Larson, right? A defense attorney for someone else is going to say, well, how can it be my client? The FBI was adamant. They were so sure. They had, all of this evidence that a jury convicted these two guys. So, I think there's a lot that goes into it. I also think it's interesting that a lot of people have said that, they feel like this kidnapping and ransom and the laundering of the money was just too sophisticated.
Yeah.
For these two guys. We kind of mentioned it. They were petty criminals. As far as we know, they had never done anything even close to, something the size of this type of crime. Don Larson would go on to commit the mass murder of 5 people. 4 years after the Piper kidnapping, he killed his soon-to-be ex-wife, her boyfriend, and 3 children. In January 1976, Larson learned that his wife, Ruth, was having an affair with their neighbor, James Fouch, who resided on an adjoining farm. He agreed to his wife's request for a divorce. On April 23rd of that year, Ruth, who had admitted being intimate with James, ridiculed Larson concerning his ability as a lover. Okay, guys don't really like that. I'll just throw that out there.
It typically does not work well.
She also demanded all of his farm machinery as part of the property division and threatened to deprive Larson of the opportunity to see their 5-year-old son, Mark. On April 24th, Larson returned to his farm after a trip to the Twin Cities to discover James Fouch's pickup truck and trailer filled with items that had been loaded from his house. Larson encountered Fouch and his wife on the porch of the farmhouse, and he punched Fouch in the mouth and threatened to kill him.
Well, I get it. You're upset. You're like, why are you taking all my stuff? Who told you could do this? And
well, you already took my wife.
yeah.
Now you're taking all my stuff. But that wasn't the end of it. Larson drew 2 pistols and shot Fouch in the shoulder. He turned from the house and was confronted by James Fouch Jr., who was 12 years old. He had witnessed the shooting. He heard Larson's threats. He screamed and he started cussing at him. Larson shot Fouch's son at close range 3 times, killing him. Then he returned to the house and he tried to prevent his wife from calling the police.
Well, of course. I don't want you calling the police.
Well, I just killed a kid.
But let's talk about this.
And I shot his dad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can't be calling the police. As they struggled, one of the pistols went off, killing their 5-year-old son, Mark. Larson then raised the gun and shot his wife in the back of her head twice, killing her. Then Larson turned to Fouch Sr. and shot him in the back of the head. Larson went outside where he encountered 2 of Fouch's sons, 8-year-old Stephen and 6-year-old Bradley, as well as 12-year-old Scott Powell, Ruth's son by a previous marriage. He ordered them to get out of the trailer.
I'm thinking at this point, I wouldn't have even been in that trailer. I would have been gone. I would have been headed out into the farm field as fast and far away as I could be.
But the boys didn't move. So Larson pulled the trigger, but he found out that both of his pistols were empty. So he began to reload. While he was doing that, the 2 Fouch boys ran into the field and they escaped. But Scott Powell ran into the house where he was confronted with the bodies of his mother, his half-brother, and he began to cry and scream uncontrollably. Larson followed him into the house and shot him in the head and killed him. I mean, this is a straight-up mass murder.
Yeah, what a brutal scene.
Larson's next move was to pick up the empty cartridges and the keys to all the vehicles, and he took off to Minneapolis. Once he got there, he threw both pistols and his jacket into the Mississippi River. He abandoned his car and checked into a motel where he was found in a semi-conscious state after he ingested a bunch of pills and downed a lot of vodka. Larson confessed to the mass killings, claiming he gunned them all down in a fit of jealous rage that overwhelmed him when he saw his wife with her new boyfriend.
Well, he's no longer a petty criminal, is he?
No, he's graduated. For sure, he was tried and found guilty of the murders and given life sentences. Now, he continued to deny any involvement with the kidnapping, even though there would be no additional consequence for the crime. I mean, he was already doing life, was never going to get out probably. So again, horrible mass murder. But what makes the timing extremely interesting is that the FBI wanted to speak with Larson's wife, Ruth, because she had provided him with an alibi to account for his whereabouts during the kidnapping of Ginny Piper. And I think, Gibbs, it's thought that she had a change of heart and was ready to provide the FBI with some information, but she said she wouldn't do it until she had successfully moved out of the home.
She wanted to feel safe.
Yeah. The meeting was scheduled to occur the day after she was shot. So Ruth never made it to that meeting. The FBI, still convinced that Larson was responsible for Ginny's kidnapping, brought in heavy equipment, and they dug up quite a bit of his farm looking for the ransom money. They didn't find any. In prison, Larson's nickname was the Mouth, apparently because he wouldn't shut up. He was also considered a shit talker.
Well, we all know a few of those.
Mm-hmm. Yep, got one sitting right across from me. Those who knew him said that if he had been involved in Piper's kidnapping, he would not have been able to resist bragging about his $1 million score and pulling off what was being called the greatest kidnapping of all time. So there's something to that, right? You've got a lot of things that make this Donald Larson look as though he had something to do with it.
Right.
And then I think you have quite a few things that are pointing maybe in the other direction. You know, this one jumps out at me. You've got this guy who wants to talk about everything he's ever done, bragging about crimes and this and that. But yet you're telling me he's going to be able to be quiet about the biggest score, obviously, that he would have ever committed. And one of the biggest things that, you know, has happened up to that point, as far as, you know, a successful kidnapping and ransom.
Yeah, because at this point, why be quiet?
He's never getting out.
Yeah.
So before he died in prison, Larson spent his time sewing quilts, and most of them had some type of religious theme.
Well, probably a little bit too late for that.
Yeah, I think so too. Ginny and Bobby Piper were devastated by the verdict in the second trial for Callahan and Larson. Ginny especially believed that they were the people who had abducted her. They refused to speak of the ordeal they had been through, and really they just wanted to put the whole event behind them. Ginny passed away in 1989, and Bobby passed 2 years later, both from cancer. It wasn't until they had both passed away that their son, Harry Jr., requisitioned the official documents concerning the case from the FBI, with the intention of hopefully solving the case and writing a book about it. But there was a problem. You know, the FBI was so convinced, Gibbs, that the second jury had gotten the verdict wrong and that Callahan and Larson were the real kidnappers, that they destroyed all the evidence collected in the case, including the hair and the shopping bag containing the partial fingerprint. And these were items that Harry was hoping to submit for DNA testing. So if that wasn't bad enough, when he received the documents, he ultimately had to force the FBI to share. The 80,000 pages he received were so heavily redacted that they were almost unreadable.
How disappointed would you be at that point?
I think very. I mean, obviously he waited for his parents to pass for a reason.
Yeah.
They didn't want this all dredged up, but they were gone, and he had a desire to get to the truth. And how was he going to get there when you've got 80,000 pages and basically they're all lined out?
Yeah.
You can't read anything. Had to be very frustrating for him. Piper's 20s continued to turn up sporadically over the next 50 years after the kidnapping for ransom of Ginny Piper. One was discovered during a federal drug bust in Philadelphia, and another was found at a Midwestern racetrack. I mean, I think the thought is, Gibbs, that the kidnappers, assuming they weren't Callahan and Larson, kind of spent this money quietly and very slowly, deliberately over the years. And really, if you think about it, if you're going to do this, that's the only way to go about it.
Well, yeah. And at this point, who was looking for it anyway?
Well, right, because the FBI had closed their case. Yeah. But still, you know, you don't want to take any chances. Launder as much as you can. Spend that money freely because that's now clean. But if you're going to spend some of the 20s, you know, don't plunk down $5,000 for a ring all in cash in those 20s.
Yeah, exactly.
Because really, unless an individual had that little notebook listing the serial numbers of the 50,000 bills, and they made a habit of checking the bills that came into their possession, who would ever know? So if I'm at a bank or I'm a shop owner and I've got the notebook, how long does it take to compare 120 to 50,000 serial numbers? Who would sit there and do that?
Nobody.
You'd have to have a lot of spare time on your hands.
Nobody's going to do that.
So maybe they didn't have to be all that careful now that I think about it. But again, I think it's for all these reasons that the FBI called the case at the time the most successful kidnapping in history. And I'm assuming most of that is based on the amount of money that these kidnappers were able to get away with.
Yeah, I mean, $1 million, man.
To this day, the three Piper sons disagree as to who was responsible for the kidnapping and what happened to the money. Middle son Addison believes that Callahan and Larson were the culprits. The oldest son, Harry, disagreed after interviewing both men accused. The youngest, David, continues to be unsure. And, he's not really into speculating or putting out theories at all. That's not his thing. So I think the big question, Gibbs, is if Larson and Callahan were not responsible for the kidnapping, then who was?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
And I think it could be very possible that the question could be answered if they would have kept that hair. You think about the advancements in DNA today. If even one of the kidnappers was in a database somewhere, boom, they would have an amazing lead.
Yeah, and from that point, they could have said, now we know.
Or they could have proved it was Callahan's.
Yes.
Or Larson's. And then, the second question is, where is the ransom money today? 50 years after it was paid to ensure the safe return of Ginny Piper. Has it all been spent? Or did the kidnappers hide some, bury some? And if they buried it, are they still alive? Is it out there waiting for someone to discover it?
What a treasure that would be to find.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with the evidence having all been destroyed and the official records redacted, we may never know.
I do think that, and thank goodness, Bobby had the resources to get the money because it did save his wife's life.
Well, and I think that's a big question. What would have happened? Were these two kidnappers killers?
Yeah.
Meaning, if they didn't get that $1 million, they would have killed Ginny Piper. I don't think you can answer that question. Obviously, Bobby was a man who deeply loved his wife.
Sure.
I think that was fairly obvious from the research. He would have gone to any length to get her back safely. He would have spent whatever he had to spend. But what if he didn't have it? What if he wasn't liquid?
Right.
What if he couldn't get his hands on $1 million in cash by the deadline? I kind of have that question in the back of my mind. Were these killers? And if I don't get it, your wife is dead.
Right. Yeah.
Or they just leave her there and they never tell the authorities or Bobby where she is.
Right. And she's just found one day, if ever.
And she would have died.
Right.
Probably before somebody found her. So, it's a very mysterious case.
It is.
There's some D.B. Cooper-like aspects to the case because, you have this money, not the same amount of money, but you have this money that never really shows up. Some of D.B. Cooper's has shown up over the years, but there's still a ton of it unaccounted for. And you have the question of exactly who was D.B. Cooper. So, but that's it for our case on the kidnapping and Virginia Piper. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Let's check them out.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Kathy from Houston, Texas. I'm just a recent listener, and I wanted to let you guys know how much I absolutely enjoy your podcast. I've never listened to one before, and I am completely addicted. I know people leave case suggestions all the time, and I wanted to leave one myself. I'm originally from Springfield, Missouri, and there was a very interesting unsolved crime of the Feeney family murders. Mr. Feeney was my chemistry teacher and one of my very favorite teachers. And what happened to this family is absolutely awful. And the fact that they don't know who did it or if Mr. Feeney was involved. It'd be very interesting. And I'm going to leave you with something to keep you interested in the story. What's really interesting is what the attorney in the case, how much this case affected him and what he ended up doing with his life after this case. So I won't tell you what it is. It'll make you interested and maybe hope you will investigate it. Thanks a lot for your podcast and keep your own time ticking.
Well, she knows how to hook me, Gibbs, because that, I'm going to go right away and check it out. But it looks like one that we could possibly do unsolved if there's enough information out there.
Sure.
It's always the key.
Yep, if we can get enough.
But we appreciate the call very much.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Charlotte. I've been a long-time listener with you guys, all the way from London in the UK, and I'm fully up to date on all of the true crime all the time, the unsolved criminology, all of your podcasts. I'm completely up to date with them. I love both of you loads. Gibby, I'm obsessed with you, as you already know. But yeah, I just wanted to actually leave a voicemail and see if Gibby can reenact my accent. So good luck with that. But yeah, thank you for all that you do. Love you loads and loads, and hopefully see you at CrimeCon in the UK one day. Keep your own time ticking. Bye.
Well, I said British. That's all I can keep saying. I'm British.
British.
I'm British.
She actually had a very cool accent.
Yes.
It wasn't real heavy.
No.
It was just, to me, it almost just had a hint. I really liked it.
Perfect.
Hey, this is Eddie. I was listening to True Crime all the time on Solved the West Mesa Boneyard podcast. I think it was episode 3. They did find out who the perpetrator was behind that. It was actually one of El Chapo's dumping grounds for the people that he had his cartel take out. So they have solved that crime. I just found out that you guys did a podcast on that a while back. I just listened to it today, and I figured I'd give you a call because I was actually one of the people that went out when I was operating equipment, and I helped move dirt around. They actually moved dirt into small piles as bobcats. Other small, they kept on moving it small to big to big. So it was actually one of El Chapo's dumping grounds. All right, talk to y'all later. Bye.
Well, I appreciate the call. Yeah, we'll have to look into that because it's not something that I think I've heard, the El Chapo angle.
No, we'll have to definitely check into it.
But it's very interesting, Gibbs, that he was out there, as part of the group.
Morning, Mike and Gibby. Happy Friday. I hope you guys had a great week. I actually kind of had a crappy week, but I'm ending it on a high note. My 50-hour work week. It is Friday, and it is my 5-year wedding anniversary. So happy. I just wanted to give a quick call because I'm listening to all the true crime all the time, Unsolved, and it's an episode from back in 2017 for Kay Wennell. And in the beginning of the episode, you're talking about how you went down to Orlando, went to the Harry Potter world, and how Gibby said they were in Huff and Puff, and I'm at work, and I absolutely lost it. I was like, oh my God, that is so funny. I am like, my coworkers probably going to think I'm nuts, but I had to play it for my husband when I got home because I'm like, babe, you got to listen to this. I'm like, Huff and Puff. And it was amazing. We're cracking up. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great Friday, a great weekend. My name is Brittany Scholar. I was going to spell it and then have you guys try and say it, but never mind. So I wanted to see how you guys would pronounce it, but I ruined it. Whatever. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
She cracks me up, Gibbs. So congratulations on the 5 years.
Yeah.
I just had my 25th.
You did.
So call me in 20 years and let me know how it's going.
Absolutely.
Mine's still going strong.
Yes, it is.
I'm happy about that. Yeah. So the reason why Gibby talks about Huff and Puff is because he's too cheap to buy the actual Harry Potter movie. So he buys the off-brand knockoff Harry Potters,
right?
And they can't use all the same terminology.
Man, you got to be careful too, because sometimes you get the wrong knockoff thing. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
This is not for children.
Exactly. Oh, what's going on there? Put that wand away, mister.
That's too funny. All right, buddy, we got to get out of here. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.